So welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission, where I'm joined by inspiring leaders driven by the impact of creating a healthy and sustainable world. Now, in today's episode, I'm joined by Sharon Walbert, VP of Global Innovation at Bunge. And I've got to know Sharon pretty well over the last few years. And look, Sharon, I'm delighted you found the time in your busy diary to come on the show today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So tell me, I mean, you've been working at the interface of innovation and food for your whole career, really, right? So just give me some context, if we take it all the way back, really, around, some of those real key forces in helping shape your, I suppose, your values and career, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I like to say that I grew up in the food business. I was raised in my mother's family's grocery store in Midland, Pennsylvania. It's just the type of small market that hardly exists in the United States anymore. But so I've been in the food business since I could walk. But it's interesting that I had no idea that the food and agriculture ecosystem really existed or was even a place to have a career when I graduated from college. So I was also lucky that the food industry found me. I was recruited out of college with a chemistry degree to work for my first company, who was in food and ag. And so in the interview, I pretended to know what fructose was, and I pretended to enjoy shift work. And fortunately, I got the job and entered the food industry. And 30 years later, it's brought me here.
Wow. Okay. Well, whole career in food, basically.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, it's changed a bit, right? I mean, like, I don't know, when you look back and you think of, when you started, how different is it really, I suppose? And I suppose you're working very much in food ingredients, aren't you?
Correct.
Yeah. So how much has it really shifted and changed, do you think, a job and a career in the food industry?
Absolutely. It's very different, and in some sense, it's very much the same. I mean, and that's the thing that we can count on with agriculture and with plant-based foods and the connection to the farmer is it's a very reliable and sustainable and secure business, which has been fantastic. I mean, it's allowed me to enjoy a 30-year career. But you're right, it has absolutely changed over the years. I mean, consumer preferences change, trends change, the global economy has changed, sourcing products from all over the world. People's diets have changed based on what we can now move from one region to another. And so things that we didn't eat 20, 30 years ago are now staples in our diet. So it's been incredible. And I think also, I mean, obviously technology has played a huge role in how food has changed to make things more efficient, more sustainably, using technology to give consumers what they want. And I think, now, especially in the last 5 years, the change has accelerated more than it has, even in the first part of my career. So there's never been a more exciting time to be in the food and agriculture space. And what really excites me is the younger generation see that, and I see a lot of people coming out of college with agriculture science degrees, food science degrees, sustainability degrees that really want to be in the food system and want to make food better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's nice to see, actually. It's nice to see across the industry so many people coming into it from
absolutely
kind of from adjacent careers.
I had a chance to spend some time with the Agriculture Future, Ag Future of America Institute. It's a student organization of kind of the cream of the crop of students in food science and ag economics and sustainability, who come together for kind of an intensive session on learning about the industry, learning about food marketing and food processing. And I was so blown away, first of all, I mean, just by the quality of the students coming in. Most of them either had their own startup companies already or had started a nonprofit. And I was also blown away by just the focus on sustainability and the interests that they had in making the food system more earth friendly. I think past generations have put them in that position where they have to think about those things, but I walked away with a really good feeling about the future of our business, just based on the level of interest and energy coming out of that group.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
amazing.
very cool.
Yeah. And but it's fascinating. It's because, as you said, they've all got their startup companies. I mean, it's it almost seems like there's no barrier to entry really when it comes to building and starting your own company.
Yeah, and that's probably the biggest question that I got among that group was, what makes for a successful startup? And I wish I could give them the short answer to that question, but no, you're right. And I think that's part of the excitement of the last 5 to 7 years in this industry is there is so much venture capital and private equity money coming in that's funding a lot of these startups. So people with good ideas and good new technology are being funded to get their ideas forward. Some not so good as well, unfortunately, but time will sort that out. But I think the good ideas that are coming in are really benefiting companies like Bunge, companies like ours who can take advantage of that. I've shared with you before that I think the best partnerships in the food industry are right now between startup companies and then large global companies who have the scale and the market reach to help them get their ideas to market. And so a lot of what I've done over the last 5 years is put that together, both when I was working independently and now with Bunge, is putting together startup companies or technology companies with great ideas, partnering up with companies with global scales, global supply chain, and the access to customers that those companies need. I think those companies are accelerating the research for companies like ours by years.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And I remember seeing you earlier in the year at the Future Food Tech, so it was great to see kind of Bunge there, and it's great to see. It really does seem that it's that collaboration between small and large. That is so pivotal and so important, actually, around there.
Absolutely. I think the traditional food companies and food ingredient companies were a little scared at first of these startups as upstarts, but then realized the value. Again, I view it as, these companies are doing the early stage research for us, and are well funded to be able to do that. And then it helps accelerate our innovation pipelines. It helps get these good ideas to market, and some of these partnerships we see already really paying off across the industry.
Yeah, no, it's great. I'm just thinking back to a conversation we had a few years ago because at the time, I think when leaving Cargill, you had that spell where you were independently working for like a year and a half, and you were kind of supporting a number of smaller entrepreneurial businesses, and you loved it. And
Yes.
you absolutely loved it. And, you would have probably bet bottom dollar that you would have either worked for one of them or something along those lines. So actually, to find you that opportunity for Bunge, where you were doing all the things that you love doing in the global nature, but then really driving some of that innovation, it was like that kind of that combination, really, wasn't it? But
it is. It's the best of both worlds. And you're right. I mean, I've now worked for 2 large global companies, and then I've also been independent, where you have to do everything yourself, and working with small companies where you've got to be very scrappy and figure out how to get resources across a network of companies. And I love both of those things. I think for me personally, I love making things happen, and I love bringing people together to make things happen and move the ball forward. Whether that's at a global company where you have to work across business units or geographies, or across different teams to start keep the ball moving and move toward your goal, or working with a small company who has to rely on other people, other resources, people they may not know to reach their vision. And that's the nice thing about a small company is they are all about the vision. They are on a mission, and they have minimal distractions, and they know where they need to be to hit their next milestone. And it's just a lot of fun to bring resources from all over the industry and from other industries in to help them move towards their goals. So that's what I love to do, whether it's with a big company or a small company.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I can see what are critical. I could. It's such an interesting vantage point, isn't it? Really, in terms of bringing both together, actually.
Absolutely.
And
yeah, it's very powerful.
yeah. But also I think for you, it was always really interesting because sometimes when you look in the food industry, you look at people and their careers, there's a lot of, there's been a lot of, I suppose, consistent growth over the years. And as a result, people, staying working for the same company for years and years and years. And, I'd always tried headhunting you for the last 5 or 6 years, for roles, and we were always in contact, and it was always a challenge to kind of shift you. And you had a really successful career at Cargill and done loads of different roles. But I really sensed that when you actually left and you were working independently outside of the corporate culture, I think you were surprised at how much you enjoyed it, really,
Absolutely.
weren't you, really?
Yeah, and I tell people this a lot. So I've talked to a lot of people, and I've counseled a lot of women on their careers and others on their careers as well. And that was the big realization for me. So growing up where in an area where a job was a great thing and you didn't give up a job unless you absolutely had to. There's a sense of that. There's a sense of that work ethic that a good job is hard to find, and you don't walk away from one when you have it. But what I tell people is it's okay. It's okay to walk away, especially if you're not fulfilled in what you're doing. You can survive, and maybe you'll find something that's even better. And as you said earlier, when I left and I took a little break, I don't mind sharing that with everyone, that I took a little bit of a break from the industry, and I highly recommend that for anyone who's able to do that mid-career. It gave me a lot of perspective, but I was okay in my independent consulting role, and I was loving what I was doing, working with companies. And then I found what I feel is the best place for me right now at Bunge as well. So there is, it's a little bit scary, but there are good things on the horizon. And what I often say to people about leaving is, bet on yourself. You are capable of doing much more than you think you are, or much more than maybe others think you are as well. So I bet on myself when I left, and I'm really happy that I did.
Yeah, no, so am I. That's great, and that's great advice. And I really felt at the time that break and that reflection and perspective and the experience you gained was so important for you in order to take that next role. It just wouldn't have worked from one to the other, basically.
Exactly. And I've shared that with you, and I share that with a lot of people, that I couldn't have stepped into the role that I have now directly from my previous role. I needed that break, and I needed that experience that I gained in between, and feel like I'm a better person for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I don't mind sharing as well. When we had the mandate with Bunge, and it was really interesting. Their mandate was, it was very much focused on finding female talent and gender diverse. I think they were looking across their organization, and really wanted to invest and find top female talent to kind of come in, and that was really important to them. And you know what, the amount of roles and opportunities I've looked at before, but finding female talent in the innovation space, or the space between R&D, R&D and innovation, it's really rare out there. Probably the single biggest function where there's a dearth of senior female leadership, actually. And is that something you're aware of, like working?
Very much. And as you noted when you were recruiting me, finding female leadership is a big priority for Bunge. We talk about it frequently, and we're still on a mission to add female leadership at the senior level. And in fact, I've some spots open in my organization for some strong female talent that I'd love to see. But you're right, and I think even within the food industry, it's segmented. I think the CPG world has been much better at this than maybe the ingredient world, and then certainly as you move more into the ag space, you find even less female leadership. But CPGs have been at it for a while. I mean, we've had great female CEOs at CPG companies like Indra Nooy and Irene. And a number of others since then. In ingredients, yeah, I think companies really have to specifically work at it. We're working at it very hard. My former company worked at it very well and has some really strong female leadership at the business unit president level. But yeah, as you go further back into the agriculture sector, which a lot of Bunge still is, it's less and less, and we need to change that. And we're trying to change that within by moving some strong female leaders over from the food ingredients side of the business more into the agriculture and the biofuel space. I think that's one way to do it, but we're open, and we are looking for strong female talent at all parts of our organization, and we want to hear from people out there who want to join a strong global company that's enjoying, you know, some record years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would have thought the whole culture around there's flexibility in culture. I suppose the challenge was always a level of inflexibility before,
Right.
In terms of the way staff would operate within an organization. But for me, it feels that's shifted and that's changed, and that's probably evolved and is creating the opportunity basically to plug more kind of diversity in, really.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's also true for our male leaders as much as our female leaders. You know, a lot of the family responsibilities are shared now, and I think you know, not only having more flexible work environment to attract female talent, but even to attract more younger male talent as well. Things like you know, paternity leave, childcare benefits. I think childcare is a major issue, one especially in the U.S. That prevents females from taking on more responsibility. I'm not an expert in this area, but I think there are a lot of just very simple and humane things that we can do as employers to get more of the workforce into the pool. Honestly, I mean, what we're doing by creating these limitations, whether it's for female or LGBTQ or whatever it is just shrinking our, you know, potential leadership talent. So, you know, we all do better when we all do better, and the bigger we can open the pool of good talent, especially for leaders, I think the better off companies will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And no, it's interesting. I was in my last podcast I put out last week, I was talking to Gio Battistini, who joined Firmenich as their head of innovation, and he had a background very much outside of the food industry. And I was like, wow, man, it's like molecules and biochemistry, and how did you deal with that? And so I suppose looking at your view on that, you look at, you've been in the industry a while, and you're an innovation leader, as it were. You're responsible for global innovation. So just a couple of things. In your experience, is it essential, to have that industry experience? Can it be brought in from outside?
Yeah. I think yes and no. So as you know, the attributes that I look for when we're bringing in technical leaders are, first, people leadership, because these are large teams and usually large global teams that we're talking about. Customer partnership. So we want people who can talk one-to-one and on the same level as our customers. A good business partner, so someone who is part of shaping the strategy of the business. The R&D leader role, the innovation leader role, typically sits on our business management teams. So in addition to running R&D, they've got to be a business visionary, a business leader that makes sure innovation has a strong voice in the formation of a strategy and at the leadership table. And then, of course, technical expertise. So I think depending on the role, and I think it varies by customer base, by region, by business type. You may order those things 1, 2, 3, 4 in a different way. But there are a lot of studies out there, especially recently, and there was a recent study that came out that said that the executive leadership qualities that are most in demand are the social skills. They are not the X's and O's of finance and management and operations. It is more people leadership and being able to relate to people. And I think that's the same for innovation. At the same time, there's a certain level of respect that we want to show to our customers, that we speak your language, we understand your business. And so I think there is a certain level of technical expertise, industry familiarity that we just owe it to our customers to bring in.
Yeah, understand. Absolutely. And no, they're very interesting. And from an innovation viewpoint, maybe let's talk a little bit about what that really means and what that really looks like. What is the VP of Global Innovation really responsible for at Bunge?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think innovation at Bunge, and I think a lot of companies in our industry view it as the things that are going to spur growth for our company. Especially a publicly traded company or any company really is interested in how they grow. How do we grow? And innovation certainly plays a role in that. We're not talking about blue sky innovation of the next 30 years, but we're talking about things that are going to provide meaningful growth and returns to our shareholders in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So I look at our role as innovation on a couple of different levels. There's the incremental innovation of working directly with our customers on the projects that they're driving. That is the flywheel that really is the engine of our business. Those are the shorter term projects, but the ones that our customers need us to deliver on now, more incremental innovation. Then there's more midterm innovation. I think that how do we manufacture better? What are the processes and technologies that improve our efficiency, our sustainability, our costs? And then we have to keep an eye on the long term, because that's our job. We're the ones in the company that are responsible for standing on the front of the ship and looking out ahead at what's coming up on the horizon. So I think that's the part that when you say innovation, I think that's what a lot of lay people envision is the next new thing, the next iPhone. But I would say it's 80% practical. How do we make our business better? And then 20% keeping an eye on the horizon for the things that are going to change our industry, change the way people eat, change what's available in the supply chain, what's coming next, what is the agricultural economy going to give us to work with in the next 10 years.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's great. And that's great context. And I think with trends, they're quite interesting trends in the food space because they don't change week to week, do they? You see the thread and they tend to kind of just continue along that vein. Is that how you see it as well? Are we pretty well baked with trends, or are they evolving?
Yeah, I think they're always evolving. And I think, ultimately consumers are going to do what's best for them. And we can predict up to a certain degree of how markets will change and how markets will shape. But especially now more than ever with food, and because food is such a personal choice, there's so much individualization. A person is going to eat how and what is best for them and what they want. So I think the industry is looking for an all or nothing answer in some cases. I look at plant-based meat versus animal products. I look at biotechnology versus locally sourced. It's not going to be an all or nothing, and it's not going to be an overnight shift. I think there's going to be room for all of this in our industry and in our diets in the coming years. So I think we see it today. I mean, plant-based meats occupying refrigerator space right next to animal-based products, and they'll have to make room for cell-based meats eventually. I think it will all coexist, and the markets will fragment, I think, more than shift.
Yeah, interesting. And no, I agree. It's definitely room for everything, for sure. And do you feel that with the plant-based explosion, basically, there's been so much money and investment into this segment of the market? And I did read somewhere last week that maybe it was a UK thing rather than a US thing, but maybe sales are starting to top out a little bit, for instance. Do you feel that maybe there's been so much paraphernalia around it that the market is only a certain size and it's just going to take a lot of time, basically, maybe longer than what the industry thought?
Yeah, that's the latest quandary that the industry's worked itself up in, I think, is, again, we predicted this massive proliferation of plant-based foods and meats in particular. And now that we're starting to see a dip, everybody's in a bit of a panic. But I've seen lots of studies and articles written on this phenomena where, we're in the trough of disillusionment right now that will correct itself with plant-based meats. And I think that's true. I think there is a proliferation. There has been a big proliferation in the plant-based meat space. Coming back to the venture capital funding that we were talking about earlier, everybody wanted in or wants in. And so we still see a lot of new products coming out of the market. Frankly, some just aren't very good. And I think the market will sort itself out. I think the winners will dominate. I think, I'll go out on a limb and say, I think some of the plant-based foods companies that are becoming more mainstream household names will grow and will become, established food companies, just like the household names we all know of the major CPGs. But there will be some cleaning and clearing of the market, I think, just based on quality and consumer preference. I think it's here to stay. So. Yeah,
absolutely. And no, interesting times ahead. And any other kind of major trends that you kind of see out there at the moment?
Yeah. I think everybody's got biotechnology on the mind. So I think, the question, and it's always funny. I think sometimes the industry looks a little inward, and we get caught up in the fact that, we've been talking about biotechnology in the food space for so long, and it's still fairly new for consumers. I think even though we've been eating fermented foods for thousands of years, people don't don't make the connection between biotechnology or precision fermentation food ingredients. It's an exciting space. I think time will tell, and customer acceptance will decide which types of ingredients can successfully be made via precision fermentation and which won't. I think fermentation is also really interesting for modification of plant-based ingredients. So we see some companies, including one of the companies that Bunge Ventures is invested in, Mycotechnology, using fermentation to modify the functionality and the flavor of proteins, which I think is a lot more applicable and probably has a lot more consumer acceptance. A lot of companies are starting to use it to upcycle food and agriculture waste materials into interesting flavors and interesting compounds that can be used as ingredients. And I think that's a great story. It's a great sustainability story, upcycling waste, creating interesting flavors. I think we'll see a lot more of that. I still think there's a lot we can do with plants, between seed genetics and engineering plants to achieve functionalities or profiles that we haven't seen before. I think that's still a very exciting space. Plus, even just there's still a lot we can do with the combinations of proteins and oils and texturizers that we have today to create new textures, new fat-like materials. So we're not tapped out with what so far. The other area that I'm interested in, we're particularly interested in, is enzymes as well. So there's so much wonderful discovery work going on using big data and AI to do protein discovery, and particularly in the enzyme space, to find enzymes that can help us process things that today we maybe process with chemicals or in other ways. Enzymes can help us, improve the carbon footprint of our processes and produce really interesting ingredients. So we're pretty bullish on the enzyme space right now, among other things.
Hence the recent investment into Arzada, I saw.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yep. So we're fortunate at Bunge that we have the Bunge Ventures arm, which is kind of an independent subsidiary that invests in food and ag technology. But we tend to make those investments in spaces that are strategic or that have a link into Bunge's core businesses in milling and protein, in oil seeds, or in the agribusiness. So we partner quite closely to vet companies and to look for companies, to scout for companies that are working in technologies that are interesting to us. And we have a list of, let's say, our top technology targets that we want to explore, that we think are going to be strategic for us in the long run. And we can work with Bunge Ventures to find the companies that have those and use our venture investment as a learning exercise in those technologies.
Yeah, excellent. Interesting. Very interesting times. It's exciting times as well. That's great. And I suppose when you're a small company and you're you're venture backed, you're relatively early, you've got some interesting technology, and you're reaching out to strategics and collaborating with the likes of Bunge. Any ideas or kind of tips for those smaller companies in terms of how to develop and have success with those relationships?
Yeah. I think it still all comes down to people, right? And I've talked to a lot of people in the VC world, as you have, and really, I think what the last decision is before an investment is made is, do we trust the team? Do we like the team? Do we think we can work with them? Is it a good cultural fit? And for us, it's the same. We really look at the people. We look at the management structure, and of course, we look at the technology. So I think that it's usually the chemistry, that type of chemistry, maybe not the technical chemistry, that makes the difference. But the other aspect, the more foundational aspect, is the techno-economic model. I think a lot of strategics, when they work with startups, I think incorrectly require that the techno-economic model today at the early stage is sound or meets their cost criteria. For me, I think it's more, does a company have a path to a techno-economic model that can be scaled and that can be commercially successful? I mean, we all know when you're making a new ingredient or a new product, your costs are disproportionately high in those early stages at low volumes. But do you have a pathway to reduce cost at scale? And that's what I like to see with a new startup.
Yeah, understand. Yeah, there's certainly a real challenge out there at the moment, isn't there, towards scale up and fermentation capability almost. It used to be, I don't know, it used to be the trend, let's work with CMOs and now apparently the CMOs haven't got any space anymore. There's not the capacity. So I'm wondering how that's really evolving and hitting the industry.
Yeah, I've always said this. I wish several years ago that I had built a small scale fermentation asset and opened it up for toll manufacturing, because I think that has been a big bottleneck, especially in the biotech space, but I think in the startup space in general, because you're right there, especially in fermentation, there wasn't that much toll manufacturing capacity to start, and then but there was a lot of demand. I think now there's more capacity coming online. Some people have taken that business model and started up toll manufacturing fermentation, but it is a gap. I think, there are organizations, well, I mean, obviously working with universities and equipment manufacturers is a way around that, but that does seem to be the biggest gap between, demonstrating your technology at benchtop or maybe at small pilot scale, and then it seems to jump up to 100,000 liters or 50,000 liters scale. So that intermediate capacity is definitely still a gap in the industry that I think a lot of people are trying to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me move on to a couple of quick fire kind of questions just to finish off with. So tell me about some great advice you've received.
Yes, and every time I get asked this question, so I always think both about the great advice I've received and bad advice that I've received. And it's funny how we always dwell on the bad stuff. But a former manager of mine asked me, we were talking about my next career moves, and she asked me, well, what are the 3 most important things to you as a person first? Not about the job, but as a person first. And it was the first time somebody really forced me to look inward and think about what did I want versus what did the company want me to do. And it was eye-opening, and it helped me make the decision about the next job that I wanted. And I felt much better about it. So that's advice that I always give to people. Think about, where do you want to live? Do you want to live in the city? Do you want to live in the country? Do you want to work in an office environment? Do you want to work in a factory? Really think about the environment that makes you the happiest, where you think you can thrive, and use that to decide what your next job should be.
Great. And what about a leader you've been inspired by?
Yeah. Again, coming back to the people aspects and the social aspects of leadership. So look, I mean, leading a big company or leading a big group within a company is difficult. Leading a small business is difficult, and leaders are making really tough decisions all of the time. And I think I didn't maybe appreciate that, or I was a little bit hard on some of my leaders early in my career, but it's tough to get an organization to move forward, whether it's a small company or a big company. But leaders who make those tough decisions but do it in a human way and maintain that humility and humanity while they do it are I think the best examples of good leaders. I'm lucky that I see that every day at Bunge. I mean, we have leaders who are making big decisions for a global company and thousands of people. But you could sit down and have a beer with them, and they'll explain to you why and what's the thinking behind that. So I think that's the way to go. The other thing I always think about, this advice that I read, is a leader's job is to set the direction, let people know where they're going, give them the tools to do the job, and then get the hell out of the way. So to me, that's the perfect leader.
Yeah, no, great. Final question. If you know everything you know now at the start of your career, what would you do differently?
I would have left unfulfilling jobs earlier than I did, or I would have raised my hand and asked for something else. I think that is the best advice. As we said earlier, it's okay. You can take your foot off the base, or you can let go of the life raft, and you'll be okay. I would have done that much earlier.
Okay, that's great. And look, Sharon, we could talk all day. Thanks so much for coming on and joining us. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.